Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. On this occasion we will tell the history of the Abbasid Caliphate, which had an important role for Muslims and gave birth to many golden generations, the beginning of the spread of knowledge throughout the world. The name of the Abbasid Caliphate, Arabic, al-Khilafah al-Abbasiyya, or Bani Abbasids, Arabic, al-Abbasiyan, was the second Islamic caliphate that ruled in Baghdad, now the capital of Iraq, and then moved to Cairo since 1261. Caliphate, this developed rapidly and made the Islamic world the center of world knowledge. This caliphate came to power after seizing it from the Umayyads and subjugating all its territories except Andalusia. The Abbasids refer to the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad's youngest uncle, namely Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib, 566 to 652, therefore they are also included in the Bani Hashim. He came to power in 750 and moved the capital from Damascus to Baghdad. It flourished for 3 centuries, but slowly faded after the rise of the Turks, who were previously part of the caliphate army they formed, and were known as the Mamluks. During Iran's 150-year reign, the caliphate was forced to cede power to local dynasties, often called emirs or sultans. Handed Andalusia to the descendants of the Umayyads who fled, the Maghreb and Afriqiya to the Aghlabiyya and Fatimids. Its total downfall in 1258 was caused by an attack by the Mongols led by Hulagu Khan, who destroyed Baghdad and left nothing behind the knowledge collected in Baghdad's library. The Abbasid Caliphate continued in Cairo, starting in 1261 under the auspices of the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. The Caliphate in Cairo ended when Egypt was conquered by the Ottoman Empire in 1517 and the title of Caliph was claimed by the Turkish Ottoman dynasty. The collapse of the Umayyad Daula, initially the spreaders of Islam on the Arabian Peninsula, who were the Abbasid Caliphate or Bani Abbasids. Descendants of Ahlul Bayt Sayyidina Hassanin, on Perka Island in the 7th century AD in 623 AD. Namely, Sheikh Ashaluddin, Viceitram Shah, Sultan Aladdin Mughayat, Sultan Ratu Jegalang Paksi, from Sultan Ratu Mumular Paksi, grandson of Sayyidina Hussein, has a special goal of spreading Islam on Perka Island, and influenced the establishment of kingdoms on the island. Evidence of the spread of Islam includes the traditional order, which is still alive and running today. Mosques and tombs, traditional history, and Islamic culture foster love of the homeland and strengthen national identity. During the reign of Caliph Marwan II, this conflict increasingly escalated, and finally in 750, because many propaganda centers were in 2 places, namely Kufa and Khurasan. Kufa was a new country in the Iraqi region, and Iraq at that time was part of the Persian region. Khurasan was also included in the Persian region. Both of them became the center of this secret society because the Umayyads themselves had a strong position among the Arabs, while the Daula that would be established would be centered on Persia, not Arabia. In both countries, many people felt dissatisfied if the Bani Hashim did not hold the caliphate, even though they were the ones who were closely related to the Prophet. Abu al-Abbas al-Saffah succeeded in overthrowing the Umayyad Daula and was later installed as caliph. Towards the Golden Peak. The Abbasid Caliphate was a continuation of the previous caliphate, namely the Umayyads, where the founder of this caliphate was Abdullah al-Saffah ibn Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Abdullah ibn al-Abbas Rahimahullah. The pattern of government implemented by the Abbasid Daula varied according to political, social, and cultural changes. His rule lasted for a long period of time, from 132 Hijrah, 750 AD, until 656 Hijrah, 1258 AD, is divided into 5 periods, viz. The first period, 132 Hijrah or 750 AD, 232 Hijrah or 847 AD, is called the period of the first Persian influence. Starting with the appointment of Khalid Bin Barmak as a replacement for Abu Muslim Al Khurasani as Wazir, and his family filled important positions in the Abbasid government. The second period, 232 Hijrah or 847 AD to 334 Hijrah or 945 AD, is called the period of first Turkish influence. Third period, 334 Hijrah or 945 AD to 447 Hijrah or 1055 AD, the period of power of the Bani Buwaih dynasty in the Abbasid Caliphate. This period is also called the second period of Persian influence. Fourth period, 447 Hijrah/1055 AD to 590 Hijrah/1194 AD, the second period of Turkish influence, under the control of the Great Seljuk Sultanate, salajiqah al-Kubra or Great Seljuk. Fifth period, 590 Hijrah or 1194 AD to 656 Hijrah, 1258 AD, the era of the caliphs was ended by the invasion of the Mongols. In the first period, the Bani Abbas government reached its golden age. Politically, the caliphs were truly strong figures and were the center of political and religious power at the same time. On the other hand, the prosperity of the people reached the highest level. This period also succeeded in preparing the foundation for the development of philosophy and science in Islam. However, after this period ended, the Bani Abbas government began to decline in the political field, although philosophy and science continued to develop. The reign of Abu al-Abbas, the founder of this dynasty, was very short, namely, from 750 to 754 AD. He was then replaced by Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, 754 to 775 AD, who was tough in facing his opponents, especially the Umayyads, Khawarij, and also the syiah. Al-Mu'tasim, the next caliph, 833 to 842 AD, gave the Turks a great opportunity to enter the government. Their involvement began as a guard army. The Abbasid dynasty made changes to the military system. The practice of Muslims participating in war has stopped. Soldiers are specially trained to become professional soldiers. Thus, the military power of the Bani Abbas dynasty became very strong. However, during this period there were many challenges and political movements that disturbed stability, both from among the Bani Abbas themselves and from outside. These movements, such as the movement of the remnants of the Umayyads and the internal circles of the Bani Abbas, the al-Khawarij revolution in North Africa, the Zindiq movement in Persia, the Shiite movement, and conflicts between nations and religious schools of thought, could all be suppressed. Then institutions developed rapidly during the reign of Bani Abbas, with the establishment of libraries and academies. The library at that time was more like a university, because besides books, people could also read, write, and discuss. The development of educational institutions reflects the development and progress of science. This is largely determined by the development of Arabic, both as an administrative language which has been in effect since the Umayyad era, and as a language of science. The influence of advanced national culture, especially through the translation movement, has not only brought progress in the field of general science, but also religious science. In the field of exegesis, two methods have been known since the beginning. The first interpretation, tafsir by al-Mansur, namely traditional interpretation by taking interpretations from the Prophet and his companions. Second, tafsir by al-Ra'i, namely a rational method that relies more on opinions and thoughts than on hadith and the opinions of friends. These two methods developed during the reign of Bani Abbas. However, it is clear that interpretation using the by al-Ra'i method, rational interpretation, is greatly influenced by the development of philosophical and scientific thought. The same thing can also be seen in the science of fiqh, and especially in theology. The development of logic among Muslims greatly influenced the development of these two fields of science. The four imams of the legal school lived during the first Abbasid reign. Imam Abu Hanifah Rahimahullah, 700 to 767 AD, in his legal opinions was influenced by developments that occurred in Kufa, a city in the midst of Persian culture whose social life had reached a higher level of progress. Therefore, this school uses rational thinking more than hadith. His student and successor, Abu Yusuf, became Qadi al-Qudhat during the time of Harun ar-Rashid. In contrast to Imam Abu Hanifah, Imam Malik Rahimahullah, 713 to 795 AD, used many hadiths and traditions of the people of Medina. The opinions of the two legal school figures were mediated by Imam Syafi'i Rahimahullah, 767 to 820 AD, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal Rahimahullah, 780 to 855 AD, who returned the madhab system and rational opinion to the hadith of the Prophet and ordered his students to adhere to it. Hadith of the Prophet and the understanding of the Prophet's companions. They did this to protect and purify Islamic teachings from the culture and customs of non-Arab people. Apart from the four founders of these great madhabs, during the reign of Bani Abbas, there were many other mujtahids who expressed their opinions freely and founded their own madhabs as well. However, because his followers did not develop, these thoughts and schools of thought disappeared with the passage of time. In the field of optics, Abu Ali al-Hasan ibn al-Haythami, known in Europe as al-Hazan, is famous as a person who opposed the opinion that the eye sends light to the objects it sees. According to his theory, which was later proven to be true, it was objects that sent light to the eye. In the field of chemistry, the name Jabir ibn Hayyan is famous. He argued that metals such as lead, iron, and copper could be converted into gold or silver by mixing certain substances. In the field of mathematics, the name Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi is famous, who was also skilled in the field of astronomy. He was the one who created the science of algebra. The word algebra comes from the title of the book, Al-Jabr wa al-Muqawwibala. In the field of history, the name al-Masudi is famous. He is also an expert in geography. Among his works is Muraj al-Zahab wa Ma'adzin al-Jawahir. Famous figures in the field of philosophy include al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, and Ibn Rushd. Al-Farabi wrote many books on philosophy, logic, soul, statehood, ethics, and interpretations of Aristotle's philosophy. Ibn Sina also wrote many books on philosophy, the most famous of which is Ash-Saifa. Ibn Rushd, better known in the West as Averroes, had a lot of influence in the West in the field of philosophy, so that there is a school called Averroism. During this caliphate, the Islamic world experienced a massive increase in the field of science. One of the great innovations of this period was the translation of works in the fields of science, literature, and philosophy from Greece, Persia, and Hindustan. Mamluk influence. The Abbasid Caliphate was the first to organize the use of slave soldiers, called Mamluks, in the 9th century. Formed by al-Mamun, these slave armies were dominated by Turks, but also included many Berbers from North Africa and Slavs from Eastern Europe. This was an innovation because previously mercenaries from Turkey were used. However, the Mamluk army helped and made things difficult for the Abbasid Caliphate. The Mamluk Bani founded their own sultanate in Egypt and moved the capital from Baghdad to Cairo after various attacks from the Tartar army and the destruction of Baghdad itself after the Mongol attack under the leadership of Hulagu Khan. Even though they were in power, the Bani Mamluk still declared themselves to be under the symbolic power of the caliphate, where the Abbasid Caliph remained head of state. Influence of the Bani Buwaih. Another factor that caused the political role of the Abbasids to decline was the struggle for power at the center of government, by allowing the position to remain in the hands of the Abbasids, because the caliph was considered a sacred religious position and could no longer be contested, while power could be established in the center or in distant regions. From the center of government in the form of small independent dynasties. Among other factors that caused the Bani Abbas political role to decline was the struggle for power at the center of government. This happens because the caliph is considered a sacred and inviolable religious position. Meanwhile, power can be established at the center or in areas far from the center of government in the form of small, independent dynasties. The Turkish army succeeded in seizing power. In their hands, the caliph was like a puppet who could not do anything. In fact, they were the ones who chose and overthrew the caliph according to their political desires. After power was in the hands of the Turks in the second period, in the third period, 334 to 447 AH/1055 AD, the Abbasid Daula was under the influence of the Bani Buwaih who believed in Shirism. Influence of the Seljuk Bani during Tughril Bek's leadership, the Seljuk dynasty entered Baghdad to replace the Bani Buwaih. Previously, Tughril Rahimahullah succeeded in seizing the Marwat and Nazabur areas from Ghaznawiya, Balkh, Jurjan, Tabaristan, Khwarezm, Ray, and Isfahan. The position of the caliph was better after the Seljuk dynasty came to power. At least its authority in the field of religion was restored after being usurped by the Shiites for some time. Even though Baghdad could be controlled, it was not used as the center of government. Tughril Bey Rahimahullah chose the city of Nazabur and later the city of Ray as the center of his government. The small daulas that had previously separated themselves, after being conquered by the Seljuk Daula, again recognized Baghdad's position, and they even continued to maintain the integrity and security of the Abbasids in order to stem the Shiite ideology and develop the Sunni Salafist ideology that they adhered to. After the fall of the power of the Bani Buwaih into the hands of the Bani Seljuk or salajiqah al-Kubra, Seljuk the Great, the position and standing of the Abbasid caliphs was slightly better. At least their authority in the field of religion was restored, and they even continued to maintain integrity and security to stem Shiite ideology and develop the Sunni manhaj adhered to by them. The fall of the Abbasid Caliphate. The important factors that caused the decline of the Bani Abbas during this period, so that many regions became independent, were, the territory of the Abbasid Daula was vast, while central communication with the conquered areas was difficult. At the same time, the level of mutual trust among the rulers and government administrators is very low. With the professionalization of the armed forces, the caliph's dependence on them was very high. State finances are very difficult because the costs incurred for mercenaries are very large. When military power declined, the caliph was unable to force the delivery of taxes to Baghdad. The Abbasid Caliphate also experienced setbacks in the economic field along with setbacks in the political field. In the first period, the Bani Abbas government was a rich government. The funds that came in were greater than those that went out, so Baitul Mal was full of treasures. The large increase in funds was obtained, among other things, from al-Kharaj, a kind of agricultural tax. After the caliphate entered a period of decline, state revenues declined while expenditures increased even more. Types of expenditure are increasingly diverse and officials are corrupt. Unstable political conditions have caused the country's economy to suffer. On the other hand, poor economic conditions weakened the political power of the Second Abbasid dynasty. These factors are interrelated and inseparable. The emergence of heretical sects and tribal fanaticism, religious fanaticism is closely related to national issues. Because the Persians' ideals were not fully achieved, disappointment prompted some of them to propagate the teachings of Manuism, Zoroastrianism, and Mazdakism. The emergence of the movement known as the Zindiq movement tempted the sense of faith of the caliphs. Al-Mansur tried hard to eradicate it. Even al-Mahdi felt the need to establish a special office to supervise the activities of the Zindiq people and carry out Minna with the aim of eradicating heresy. When this movement began to be cornered, many of its supporters took refuge behind Shiite teachings, so that many Shiite sects were seen as gulat, extreme, and considered deviant by Shiite adherents themselves. The Shiite sect is known as a political sect in Islam that confronts al-Sunnah ideology. The Mu'tazila sect revived during the Bani Buwaih era. However, during the Seljuk dynasty, which adhered to Sunni ideology, the elimination of the Mu'tazila group began to be carried out systematically. With the support of the rulers, the Asyariya sect grew and prospered. Al-Ghazali's thoughts, which support this school, are the main characteristics of al-Sunnah understanding. These thoughts have had an unfavorable effect on the development of Islamic intellectual creativity until now. Crusade. This crusade occurred in 1095 AD, when Pope Urban II called on Christians in Europe to carry out a holy war, to regain the freedom to make pilgrimages to Baitul Maqdis, which was controlled by the Seljuk rulers, and to prevent the influence and invasion of Muslim armies on Christian territory. As previously, Sultan al-Barzilan Rahimahullah's army in 464 H. 1071 AD, which only had a strength of 20,000 to 30,000 soldiers, in this incident succeeded in defeating the Roman army of 40,000 to 70,000 soldiers. Consisting of Roman, Guz, al-Akraj, al-Hajr, French and Armenian soldiers, this event is known as the Manzikert incident. Even though the Muslims succeeded in defending their areas from the Crusaders, they suffered a lot of losses, because the war took place in their territory. These losses resulted in the political power of Muslims becoming weak. In such conditions they do not become united, but instead become divided. Many small daulas became independent from the central Abbasid government in Baghdad. The Mongol attack and the fall of Baghdad. In 565 AH or 1258 AD, a Mongol army of around 200,000 people arrived at one of the gates of Baghdad. Caliph al-Mustashim, the last ruler of the Bani Abbas in Baghdad, 1243 to 1258, was completely helpless and unable to stem the typhoon of Hulagu Khan's army. At this critical moment, the vizier of the Abbasid Caliphate, Ibn al-Qamai, a Shiite, wanted to take the opportunity to deceive the caliph. He said to the caliph, "I have met them for a peace treaty. Hulagu Khan wants to marry his daughter to Abu Bakr ibn Mutashim, the caliph's son. In this way, Hulagu Khan will guarantee your position. He wants nothing but fulfillment, as did his grandfather's your grandfather against the Seljuk sultans." The caliph accepted the proposal. He came out with several followers bringing pearls, jewels, and other valuable gifts to hand over to Hulagu Khan. Hulagu distributed these gifts to his commanders. The caliph's departure was followed by palace officials consisting of jurists and prominent people. However, various Hulagu Khans were truly beyond the caliph's expectations. What his vizier said turned out to be untrue. All of them, including the vizier himself, were killed by having their throats cut in turn. With this cruel murder, the end of Abbasid rule in Baghdad. The city of Baghdad itself was razed to the ground, as were other cities through which the Mongol army passed. Even though it had been destroyed, Hulagu Khan established his power in Baghdad for 2 years, before continuing his movements into Syria and Egypt. The fall of the city of Baghdad in 1258 AD to the Mongols not only ended the rule of the Abbasid Caliphate there, but was also the beginning of the period of development of Islamic politics and civilization, because Baghdad was the center of Islamic culture and civilization, which was very rich in knowledge, and also disappeared on the scorched earth by the Mongol troops led by Hulagu Khan. So our discussion of the history of the Abbasid Caliphate ends. Hopefully it's useful. Greetings.